Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. Looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler episode 564. Today the Amateur Traveler talks about caves, underground rivers and waterfalls, towns designated as magical, and a city once thought to have been built by giants, as we go to central Mexico. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Without further ado, let's go on a road trip through central Mexico. I'd like to welcome to the show Amie from the travelingtogetherjournal.com and the YouTube channel of the same name, who has come to talk to us about some road trips based outside of Mexico City in Mexico. Amie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
That was a rather complicated way to describe what we're talking about. What we're not going to be talking about Mexico City today, but a number of different things in the region. Now, we're going to Mexico City because it's a really cool place and there's lots of cool things to see, but why are we leaving the city and going to some of the places you're going to be talking about?
For me and my husband, Matt, we are not big city people. So,
and Mexico City is a big city.
Because we are on this really long road trip, we never actually went inside Mexico City. But this itinerary I've got planned, you just fly into Mexico City and then go do all these really awesome things. Excellent. With a rental car.
And personally, I understand what you're saying with cities. Mexico City is intimidating, and I can see why someone might skip it. I don't think you should, but we'll save that for that episode that we did on Mexico City. Where are you going to take us to? Where are we going to start?
Well, you're going to fly into Mexico City, and I think that if you like cities, you should go ahead and do a night or two there. But if you're anything like we are, we headed out to Teotihuacan, which is about an hour away, and are some really amazing archaeological site pyramids in Mexico. Really, really big pyramids. And
when we say really, really big, the third largest pyramid in the world, I thought, although I think last time I looked that up, I found that I was wrong, but really big. The same base as the Great Pyramid in Egypt, but half the height.
Right. It's just not as tall, but you will feel like it's just as tall because you get to climb up to the top of it.
Which you cannot do at the Great Pyramid in Egypt.
Correct. From Teotihuacan, we're going to drive another 2 hours to Parque Nacional El Chico and visit the town of Mineral del Chico.
Okay.
This is really cool because I think when you think of Mexico, you do not think of cold pine forests.
I do not.
And this park is a chilly pine forest with rivers and waterfalls and just crisp, clean air. It's amazing.
Excellent. And where would we go from there?
And from there, we are going to head up to Grutas Tolentongo. And this place is fantastic. It's 3 hours from Parque Nacional El Chico. And it is a couple of caves, hot steam caves. It's sandwiched in between a box canyon, and it's the end of a box canyon. And you have these cascading hot waterfalls falling into and over these caves into a warm river. And it has become a bit of more of a water park. But when you're there, the natural beauty is something that you're surprised is part of one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. It's amazing. And then from there, you go back to Mexico City. So if you want to spend some more time in Mexico City, this is a great opportunity before your flight back out.
Excellent. So you started us in Teotihuacan, and we talked about the being large pyramids there. Tell us a little more about your experience there.
Well, we didn't do what the guidebook recommends. We headed there in the middle of the afternoon. So it was really hot and really crowded.
There are some times that listening to what the guidebook said, and the guidebook said get there first thing in the morning.
It does. And I think that's probably a really good idea.
Yeah.
We were in Teotihuacan Trailer Park because we are on a road trip and we're doing lots of camping. And it is within walking distance. It's 1.5 kilometer away from the Teotihuacan archaeological site. But then it also added an extra hour and a half of our walking and day to the adventure, right? So we get in there probably 10. So it's just about to get super, super, super hot. And there's all these people and these stands. You can buy trinkets and t-shirts and hawkers. There's lots of people trying to sell you things. They're blowing out of these little bird whistles. Or what was really funny is the ones that sound like a jaguar.
Okay.
That is roaring, which was pretty cool. So I think if you have kids, this is a perfect opportunity for you to pick up something for them when you get home.
I had completely forgotten about both of those things. And as you're saying that, they come right back to me. The sound of those two things, which you heard constantly when you were in the park. That is so funny.
You walk past the first 5 stairs and you come into the archaeological site, and immediately you're like, whoa, you are presented with Pyramid of the Sun over on the left side of you. And it is huge and magnificent. And I think you get goosebumps, right? Being in the presence of this amazing architecture that was done all by hand without any major building tools. I'm not really finding good words for this.
Or possibly by spaceships. Literally, the Aztecs didn't know who built these things. When the Aztecs came upon them, they thought they were done by giants. You can understand why someone may have decided that, because they are large, they are massive, they are impressive, and it's a large, large site and amazingly well preserved.
Yeah, I call it urban hiking, this day that we did.
Okay.
Because between Pyramid of the Sun and Pyramid of the Moon, it is at least a half mile. And that's if you just go directly there, which you're not going to do. You're going to be up and down, so many stairs.
Tell me if I've got this wrong. You can only climb halfway up the Pyramid of the Sun, and you can climb all the way up the Pyramid of the Moon?
Opposite.
The opposite. Okay. I had them in the wrong place. Okay.
Yeah. And by the time we got to Pyramid of the Moon, we both looked at it and we're like, do you need to go up there? And we're like, no.
There are some nice views from there. Well, the other thing we didn't say is you're at altitude, right? All of the central plateau of Mexico is not at sea level. It's more than a mile up. So it's breathtaking in more than one way, climbing these pyramids. I'll be honest, I had to stop multiple times on the climb all the way up to the top of the Pyramid of the Sun. But it's worth it. You should do it if you're in, any sort of reasonable physical shape, but you may have to pace yourself.
I looked it up. It's 248 stairs to the top of Pyramid of the Sun. It's 200 feet high. And I don't know who these people were that were climbing these stairs, because I thought most of the indigenous cultures were really short people, but their stairs are really high from one another.
Hence
They're not like your normal stairs.
Yeah, hence the Aztecs thinking this was built by giants. Just literally, I understand why they thought so. And actually, there's a video in Amateur Traveler. I think you spotted that when you were looking at the site, that shows some of this site and shows some of the view from the top. And I suspect there's video on your site too, since you have a YouTube channel.
There is not one yet.
Okay.
We are very behind in where we're releasing and where we currently are. But I think it's a few months out. I went through all of our footage yesterday to kind of relive the experience, which was really fun.
When there is a video, Amie will tell me, and we'll put a link in the show notes of this article. So we'll change that article. So if you're listening to this later in time, then you can check out the link to their video, but it won't exist right away. Excellent. Anything else we want to say about Teotihuacan?
Yes. It's not just impressive for how massive it is. The detail in the carvings is incredible. It's the kind of detail you only see with somebody who's really, really skilled wood carver or really, really skilled with cement work. And they were carving these rocks with who knows what tools they were using at the time. So to see these snakes slithering through shells and these snake heads through flowers, and they look like they had water or maybe even blood that maybe came out of it, because this was a culture that sacrificed bodies to their gods at the base of these pyramids.
We think, because we don't know a whole lot about that culture. Yeah. And we should say it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And we believe that it was constructed until around 250 AD. So this is not quite 2,000 years old. The city started about 100 BC is what I'm reading. So about 2,000 years old in general for this city. So we should say, too, that some of the treasures that were found at Teotihuacan you can find in Mexico City in the Archaeological Museum, but you have to go in the city for that. And then you had some suggestions on where to stay, where to eat in that area?
Yeah, so if you are doing a road trip and you want to do anything like camping, because an amazing way to see some of these really cool things that are outside the city of Mexico is to actually pack your tent and rent a car and go to some of these places that are super, super, super cheap. So I think it's like 150 pesos, which is like $5 or $6 for both of you to stay at, say, a trailer park and camp. And in the area where that trailer park is really cool because there is a town center. A lot of places call it a Zoloco, but I don't think that they actually have that name for it.
A Zocalo?
Yeah, Zocalo. Sorry. That's a common name for the town center in most towns. So it's kind of similar to one of those.
The town square. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a town square. And they set up all these vegetable markets during the day. And I mean, they're huge. And so it's a really cool way to experience the actual local culture and see people in their everyday lives, going to the market, buying food, hawking goods. It's just sort of something out of a movie, really, to walk around the markets. And then at night, that same area becomes food stalls. You have al pastor and maybe beef that's cooked just like al pastor, like on the spigot, where they kind of just slice it off and put it in your tacos fresh, and everything's just super tasty. And
you say al pastor. We don't want to underemphasize this because it's a specialty of the region. Can you describe what al pastor is?
The most amazing thing you could put in your face.
That is correct. That was correct answer.
I miss it now that we're not in Mexico quite a bit. Okay. Al pastor is pork, and I'm not even a huge pork fan, and al pastor is amazing. And they have it on a spigot. It's sort of like if you've ever had
shawarma.
Gyros. Yeah. Same thing, right? So they take a knife and they slice off a thin bit, and they have a fire roaster on one side, and the pork rotates on a spigot. And so just the outside cooks slowly, and then they just cut the outside off. And so it's constantly cooking. But the meat is lots of little pieces of pork piled on top of each other, sort of like a pyramid, then put onto the spigot. And so they're able to marinate throughout the whole entire piece of meat. And so it's just delicious all the time.
And the meat is an unusual, kind of weird looking red color and has a tangy barbecue sauce on it. Very wonderful. Often served with pineapple too in Mexico City.
Pineapple and cilantro.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful local specialty. Really, in all of Mexico, the Al Pastor I think of as the Mexico City region. So definitely something I would completely underline what you're saying as a thing to try there. Cool.
The interesting thing about Al Pastor, too, that I found in all of Mexico is it is only served in the evening.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, you don't walk down the street and get Al Pastor in the middle of the day.
I don't know that I noticed that.
Yeah, I think it's because the fire pit, the fire that they're creating and the slow cooking, they want to bring it out only when it's going to actually be busy because it's such a fresh food. You have this, basically uncooked meat sort of just sitting there. It needs to be eaten that evening.
Anything else we want to say about Teotihuacan before we move on?
No.
Okay, cool. Where to next?
From Teotihuacan, just a couple hours, you head over to Parque Nacional El Chico. You're going to go through a town, Pachuca, that most of your guidebooks are going to talk about. And it used to be a Pueblo Mágico. Well, I think it still is, but it doesn't really have that Pueblo magical thing going on anymore because of the urban sprawl.
We're going to have you define what you're talking about when you say a Pueblo Mágico. This is where I would get my magical incantations.
Mexico has lots of these little towns that they've deemed as Pueblo Mágicos, and it is to promote tourism in those areas. And they normally probably were given some money at some time to sort of spoof up and enhance the town. But some of them are definitely more magical than others.
Okay.
So El Chico, or Mineral El Chico, which is the little town after you go through the entire national park, El Chico, and it's at the base of the canyon. So it's very steep switchbacks to get in there after you go through the national park. And it is magical. It is so cute. It's everything you would envision of a cute old cobblestone town. It's adorable. It's really old. It's really authentic, and it's really well taken care of. All the buildings are in really great shape. All the houses are very nice, and it's kind of unusual because you go through Mexico and there is a lot of poverty there. And so a lot of houses are falling apart. There are a lot of people living in less than ideal housing situations. So to go into an entire town where everything is just really beautiful is noticeable.
Okay.
And it's in this canyon. So the air is super fresh. And you have all these beautiful views of the canyon, and you go towards the end, and that's where all the mines are. So they have zip lines that go through the mines, some of them, and down the river. And they used to ore silver there. That was one of the original silver mines.
Back up here a little bit. When you say the zip lines go through the mines, are we talking about open pit mines, or are we talking about, am I underground as I'm zip lining here?
The ones that we saw specifically went from one side of, say, like a creek or river, and it exited out another one. But it was definitely a man-made.
But I'm not underground. Okay.
No. So they have these like little suspension bridges that go over the rivers, and you can go, they have hard hats for you to wear, and you peek into the mines. And I don't know, it's just pretty cool to see. Besides the town and the tour of the mines kind of at the bottom of the town, the national park itself is really, really beautiful. I didn't envision pine forests when I think of Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really think of crisp, cold air when I was thinking of Mexico. So it was definitely one of the cooler places we visited in Mexico for these reasons. They have a lot of geological formations. It's very popular for rock climbers to go bouldering there. One of their more popular areas is Las Ventanas, which means windows.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to assume that's just based on the idea that you have a beautiful view of the canyon, maybe once you're at the top of those boulders. And we actually just camped. It was on a weekday, so all the camping areas were closed. And we asked a police officer, like, hey, where can we camp? And he's like, wherever you want. You just don't have to pay. So we're like, okay, cool. So we ended up camping in this area that you could tell other people have camped in the past, right on our own little creek. And just down the road from there, we found this trail while we were collecting firewood at one point. And we went on this hike through these canyons and walked upon these big, huge boulders, and it opened up into these huge valleys, and we ended up finding some waterfalls on our hike. And it was just a really magical, beautiful area that we didn't pay anything to be there. And then one of the regional cuisines that's very popular in Mineral del Chico is trout. So they are catching fresh trout there. I actually saw them call it salmon, and I had to look it up. And it's more like how the steelhead has gotten the name salmon. It's not actually a salmon.
Okay. Anything else we want to talk about in that area? Because I know you've been really dying this whole time to get us to the caves.
Yeah. Well, the National Forest was protected in 1898. So that's actually really old for a protected area. Yeah. I thought that was actually really cool at the time. There are lots of places to actually stay and rent inside Mineral del Chico. Really, really nice, cute places as well. So if you weren't into camping, it would be easy to find nice accommodations. The town is dead during the week. So if you want the place completely to yourselves and you want to be able to camp for free during the week, is the way to go. The area, it does get tourism on the weekends. If you're going there and you're not going just to do the camping, I would actually recommend going to this place on the weekend, because a lot of the hotels and restaurants would be closed during the week. But if you're looking for solitude and you're looking for free camping and to be able to just go on hikes through the forest, I would then recommend going during the week.
Okay. Excellent.
But this leads me into the next place, the Grutas, because if you go to El Chico on the weekend, that's perfect timing for heading to the Grutas during the week when it will be less crowded. And on the weekend, the Grutas is crazy crowded with almost all local tourists. It's really cool, actually. We showed up on a weekend, and it was an amazing sight to see just thousands of Mexican families having a really good time on the banks of this river, and most of them camping. They do have 3 hotels, and they're all really, really reasonably priced. But there are thousands of people camping and having barbecues and just having a general blast. So to get to the Grutas, it's from El Chico. It's going to be about 3 hours. And it's down some steep switchbacks again. And local transportation is actually pretty easy to get. If you go into Mixquilopan, I don't know that I'm saying that right, but it is the closest town, major city to the Gruta. So you can get for 50 Mexican pesos, a small shuttle bus will take you all the way to the Grutas.
And how do you spell the town that we're pronouncing there?
Ixmiquilpan.
Okay. And I have no idea how to pronounce that. I know that if we were using some of the indigenous languages, then the X is more of a sh sound. So it really just depends on where that's from.
It's in the Tital Valley of the state of Hidalgo. The state of the Hidalgo in general doesn't really get a lot of tourism. That's also where the El Chico is and the Grutas. And I was really shocked to find out that the Grutas Tolantongo is not in the Lonely Planet at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they have this map, and Mixhuapan is right in the map, and then somehow they just like totally don't talk about it. I went through my entire Lonely Planet Mexico book to figure out what do they not tell you about when it comes to the Grutas. They don't tell you about anything. It's really astounding because this place is definitely should be on one of the natural wonders of the world. It's absolutely beautiful. I can't even really put it to words how gorgeous it is, but it's the end of a canyon and there's this huge waterfall over these rocks, and you have all this moss growing on the rocks in between where the water isn't pouring. And because it's hot water, it's steaming. Mm-hmm. And then it goes over the front of these grutas, which grutas means caves.
Right.
And then enter these caves, and the largest cave, the main cave, is about as big as a tennis court. So it's a really big cave, and they have multiple huge spouts of really intense water flow coming through these spouts of really, really warm water. It's pretty cool. And then they have another cave that's completely dark. So I would potentially recommend having a waterproof flashlight if you have one. Mm-hmm. Although you don't need one because they have tons of employees in the cave there to help you out if you were to say fall or get lost or whatever. But you have this rope and it's going against the current, and you head into this dark cave just to check more of it out. And there's more water spouts of hot water. And then it's really cool because you can just kind of like let your weight go and let go of the rope, and it'll float you out towards the main cave again. So it's almost like a really slow amusement park ride.
So it's an underground river, at least in part. Very cool.
Mm-hmm. And then the whole entire river, after it comes out of the caves, flows out, and they've got it kind of terraced, which is a little weird because you think of this big, huge natural place. Why didn't they just leave it 100% natural? But they get a lot of tourism, so it's very cool that they're at least preserving this awesome area. And they have it terraced so people can be in this warm river, and it's like giant swimming pools.
Okay.
And then they have what is called pozas, which is basically if you envision a hot spring anywhere, maybe even in the United States, right? So you have these big hot spring pools. Mm-hmm. But what they've done is they've made them out of cement so that there's 30 of them on this cliff, just looking out into the valley. And since the water has minerals in it, it deposits these minerals onto the cement. And so now the cement is unrecognizable as cement pools. It's all natural, covered with the rock sediment from the water.
I should say, while you're pausing here, that I have looked up how to pronounce the name of the city. It was of no help whatsoever. I'm pretty sure that one can't actually say this word. It's something like Ntis Utk Ani.
I wish you could send it to me. Maybe I could try.
And it literally means, it comes from the phrase of the place where the pigweed cuts like flint knives. Just so you know, that is the origin of the word. And I honestly look at the pronunciation, and it was of no help whatsoever, and it didn't seem to correspond at all to the other word. Like those letters are not there.
I think if you look up Mixhuapan as any normal Westerner, you'll be like, oh yeah, it's right there.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not the correct way to say it. Yeah.
And we'll put a link in the show notes so you can know how badly we are butchering the pronunciation of this name.
The indigenous word. So that sounds like it's actually pronounced more of an indigenous way instead of necessarily just a Spanish way.
This is an indigenous word. It comes from the Otomis, are the original people there, and later the Toltecs.
Awesome.
Usually the X, I should say, not in Mexico, but in quite often an IX is an indication of indigenous word in my experience. So there's a couple different ways they're pronounced in the different languages. And so, for instance, I would have not guessed this at all. Anyway, go ahead.
So while you're there, if you do actually go there on a weekend, you are going to have more facilities. Once again, the place gets completely deserted during the week. So when we showed up, we were able to experience how the locals experience this place with their festive parties, and they have special restaurants open just on the weekends, and they have these big barbecue pits that are in the ground, and they put entire lambs in there, and they cook entire lambs. So they call it barbacoa. So that would be the regional food in Hidalgo, would be barbacoa lamb. And you just order lamb like by the kilo. And then they serve it with tortillas and consume, which is a brothy soup made from the fat of the lamb.
Okay.
So if you're looking for some more like authentic cuisine, or if you're heading there and you don't want to camp and you want to get a hotel room and you want to be able to eat out the local food, they also have a lot of sort of more local food stands that you would maybe just find throughout all of Mexico. They have that style of food stand in the camping area. And they're very traditional in the sense that they look like they were just made with some coconut trees, and they've got plastic roofs with rocks on them and any plastic chairs that they can find, kind of thing.
Okay. And we should just mention that barbacoa is where we get our word barbecue from. It came basically up into the U.S., into Texas, and the Tex-Mex cowboys and the vaqueros were making barbacoa, or this whole roasted animal sort of thing, and it transmogrified over time into barbecue. This is what led to barbecue. So we have the Mexican people to thank for what I think really deserves a fair amount of thanks for barbecue. So
definitely. I do want to say, though, that if you did want to go camping here and you didn't have your own camping stuff, they actually rent everything that you would need. And most of the families that go there, you can tell they've rented the stuff because it's like, all the same stuff. They have chairs, tables, mats, blankets, tents. And then the more people in your group, obviously, the cheaper it is to rent all of that stuff for your group.
Excellent. Do you have a particular outfitter that you know of, or would we just have to Google for that?
No, you just go to Grutas Tola and Tongo. This place is really well organized. You just drive in, you pay your entrance fee, and you don't pay a separate camping fee. You just pay a parking fee. So it's per vehicle.
I see. Okay.
And then you head down to one of the lower hotels, and they have a sign with their price listings of all the stuff that you can rent for your camping weekend. And then you just put your tent wherever you want. It's not like in the United States where you have slot B39.
Okay.
It's a free for all. So just be warned that they do not have the same spatial issues we do.
In terms of personal space.
Personal space, yeah. Their personal space is different. We've been camping lots of times and woke up in the morning and someone's tent was so close you couldn't open your door.
That's pretty close. That sounds, though, like Yosemite's main floor. So there are different places in the U.S. where we camp a little closer together than others as well, depending on how crowded they are. Now, I think that kind of sums up the 1 week road trip that you were recommending. If someone had more time, how would you extend that?
I would extend it by heading over to the ruins of Cantona. These were actually the first ruins we saw, and they were really, really cool. It's also a really big facility. It has not been uncovered nearly as much as Teotihuacan. A lot of it is still covered with grass. A lot of the ruins have all been covered up by vegetation of some sort. And you can actually just walk through where people used to live. And then they do have a lot of really interesting culture stuff. So this was a farming area. So the things that were important to them were a little bit different than, say, in Teotihuacan, where it was a major city hub. They had practices in Cantona that were more spiritually linked to farming practices.
Okay.
And so that was really cool.
And this is down on the way towards Puebla. So we're now down in the southeast of Mexico City.
Correct.
Okay.
And along with that, I would head over, which would be a little bit more south from Cantona. There's a place called Jardín Botánico Hila Brava Joles.
So a botanical garden.
Yes, it's a cactus botanical garden.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, you don't really think of botanical gardens as being cactuses. But this place will remind you, if you've ever been to Baja California, Mexico, with its huge, giant, towering cactuses all over the place. And then they've done a really nice job at actually, I don't know if they were all natively there. I'm sure all the plants were natively there, but when you walk around the place, you'll find some offshoot trails, and there's just tons of these cute little cactuses, all different types, all over the place. It's really, really cool. And they have some really interesting tours to some smaller, less well-known archaeological sites. And then if you head down the road from there, like 20 minutes, it's really close. There's another little town called San Juan Raya, and this might have been one of our favorite activities that we did in Mexico. We went on a hike to go see dinosaur footprints. We saw T-Rex and Brontosaurus footprints. So you go hiking through what is a river part of the year. There is still a little bit of a stream in some areas, but there's not much water there. There's a lot of cows that you're walking by, and you're walking through this, what is a riverbed. And your guide is showing you all the different types of cactuses and telling you how they eat them and how they drink them. And the high season for eating and drinking cactuses is in April. I didn't go there in April, but I would love to go there in April. I think that would be really, really cool. But as he's guiding you through this river, he's picking up fossils and their ocean shells. And telling you about how historically this place used to actually be part of the Atlantic Ocean. And he tells you about the volcanoes erupting, and it's all this stuff that you learned in school, like when you were a really young kid in school, about the meteorites that came and the volcanoes that erupted and how the dinosaurs died. But then here you are getting this history lesson again by your guide in Spanish about how the dinosaurs died again. It was really cool. And then to go and see the actual footprints.
Well, and you say in Spanish, that sort of brings up the question in general, as you're in this region, you are comfortable in Spanish. If someone was not, where would they have more luck with English and where would they have less?
Our Spanish is not very good at all. So it was a long day going on that tour and trying to listen to everything in Spanish and sort of talking back and forth with Matt and I, like, oh, what did you get from that? Or what did you get from that? But in general, if you know zero Spanish, you're going to be totally fine going to Teotihuacan.
Sure. In fact, you'll get approached by an English-speaking guide, I'm sure, while you're there.
Oh, definitely. If you want a guide, you can definitely get an English-speaking guide in Teotihuacan. Parque Nacional Chico, even my Spanish was hard. So having Spanish didn't really seem to help. The shenanigans that unfolded in me trying to find salsa. Yeah. I could not find salsa. I was like, that red stuff that has cebollas, which is onions, and tomates, and ajo, which is garlic, like describing it down to the detail of what I was looking for. And they were just like, ketchup? I'm like, no. Okay, I guess they don't have salsa here. So I don't know that it necessarily, you need to be comfortable with the language to go. I mean, a lot of our communication is like playing taboo and charades at the same time.
Tourist charades, yep.
So I think just working on being okay with not knowing how to say things and being able to take people's kindness. And I mean, obviously you're not going to get the history lesson out of San Juan Raya at all if you don't speak any Spanish, and we didn't ask. They might have a guide that speaks English at the museum there. So if you did want to go, you go into the town of San Juan Raya, and there's a museum there, dinosaur museum,
Okay.
which is pretty cool. And they've got lots of fossils there for you to look at, and they have signs for you to read. So I think that it could still be worth experiencing and exploring.
Okay. Most memorable local you met?
I guess I would have to say our guide in San Juan Raya, since we spent quite a few hours with him trying to talk with him about the history of dinosaurs.
Excellent. As we start to wrap this up, anything else you want to mention before we get to some of our wrap-up questions?
I would have to say, don't be afraid of Mexico. Mexico is really rich with culture. The people are really friendly. They know what their image is out in the world. And they want you there. They're super friendly. And we spent 6 months in Mexico and never had a single negative thing happen to us. So go to Mexico.
One thing that surprised you about this particular area of Mexico?
How cold we were. From the deserts where San Juan Raya are and the Botanical Garden and even Teotihuacan and the Grutas and El Chico, at night, everything's actually really cold. We were there in October.
Okay.
So it's not the middle of winter, but yet it was shockingly cold.
Well, it's dry and at altitude, so that's not too surprising. But yeah, is it necessarily what you picture in Mexico?
No. I mean, you picture maybe the Botanical Garden in San Juan Raya with its cactuses and dry, and it's warm during the day. But you don't picture waterfalls and rivers and pine forests. I don't think nearly as much. There was a lot of times where I actually felt like I was back home in Washington and Oregon, which is where I'm from.
I think that's one of the reasons why you've obviously did a large exploration of Mexico, but Mexico is a really interesting and diverse country. It really deserves some exploration besides just the beach in Cancun and Mexico City. So really cool to hear about someplace that I had never heard of. Well, I'd been to Teotihuacan, obviously, but I hadn't heard of any of these other places that you've been. And there are so many places we haven't talked about yet, even on Amateur Traveler. It's an interesting country with some really good food. So you're standing at the prettiest spot. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
I would have to say you're standing on the river at Grutas Tolantongo, and it's Monday morning, so no one's there. You're all by yourself, and you just have this beautiful, massive waterfall, and it's steaming because the morning air is so crisp. Everything is just letting off all this steam.
Very cool. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in central Mexico.
Someone camping so close to you that you can't open your door.
You can't open your door. That seemed like, that would violate my personal space there.
It does, but you can't do anything about it. You're in their country, and this is how they camp or do things. And it happens all the time. Another thing, only in Mexico, is the bombas, which is what you call them, but they're explosives. Explosives go off, and they are for fun. There's no ill intention. Constantly. First thing in the morning, all night long, doesn't matter where you're at. You could be in one of the most remote, silent areas. Don't be surprised when you hear a bomba go off. Sometimes it's just mining, and you can actually hear the mining around, but a lot of times it's just a thing. That's how they have a good time.
And if you had to summarize central Mexico in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Culture, diversity, and adventure.
Excellent. Excellent. Our guest again has been Amie. Amie, where can people hear more about your travels?
We have a YouTube channel called the Traveling Together Journal, and you can go to thetravelingtogetherjournal.com as well for any of our adventure series videos.
Excellent. Well, and thank you for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for Mexico.
Thank you for having me.
In news of the community, I heard this week from Ashley, who left a comment on episode 469, Travel to Munich, Germany. And it went like this. Hello, Chris and Laurel, who was the guest on that show. 2 years after this podcast about Munich, and I finally went. I live in Wiesbaden-Hesse, Germany. Since I've been here, I've felt like I couldn't connect with Germany. I think I have been in the wrong state. Bavaria is lovely. I had a new appreciation for Germany and felt more open to Hesse when coming back home. I happened to be in Munich for their Town Foundation Festival, and it was so fun. I didn't attend too many of the events, but the city was packed with Münchners and Bavarians, and the festive atmosphere was contagious. I found myself smiling and laughing so often at the happenings around me. I was traveling alone. I wanted to pick up on Chris's quote, most interesting person you met, unquote, while in Munich. I took Laurel's advice and went to the Augustiner Keller and took a seat at the big open table. Within a few minutes, a Russian woman sat across from me and waited on her party. Then a German man and his wife approached and communicated that they'd like to sit there as well. We fumbled through so much broken German and English, they sat down next to me. He's wearing lime green flip-flops with a golden anklet, shorts, and they're wearing matching surfing windbreakers. We are enjoying the atmosphere, and they entrust me with watching their bag, and I'm thinking tourists, and shaking my head. They sit back down, and my food arrives. Bon appetit, the German man says to me, the obvious American. Haha. While I'm eating my very delicious meal, I realize the guy next to me knows the entire staff of the restaurant and some of the guests. I was dead wrong that he was a tourist, so I start paying attention. He's got painted nails, glitter, and royal blue, and is the happiest person. His wife is cracking up at whatever he's talking about. He continued to say hello to everyone. Everyone. And when I departed the table, they said goodbye and au revoir and tschüss. What fun dinner companions, even though we couldn't speak to each other, and what a great recommendation for a restaurant. In May and June, I spent weekends in Prague, Dresden, Nuremberg, and Munich will forever be a favorite. Friendly and warm, and such a beautiful city. Ashley, thanks so much for sharing your experience. I love to hear when people have been someplace that we have talked about on the show. I had a couple times this week where people told me about their travel plans based on some place or another, or going to some place that we've talked about. And that is always great fun for me to hear that people are making use of the show or improving it with their comments, as Ashley just did. One other word, and that's on the trip to India this fall. We have pulled the trigger. We're buying tickets. The trip is a go, even though we are one or two people short. That does mean to keep the price the way I said. The rest of it is coming out of my pocket, so I'd love for one or two more people to join us in India in November. If you have any questions, drop me an email at host@amateurtraveler.com. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, again, send me an email or leave a comment as Ashley did. And thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more